Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about XY scatter plots. You may have seen me talk about them in the last video, the not Thunderhill, the Laguna Seca download video, and just wanted to go into it a little bit more to kind of explain why I'm looking at an XY scatter plot and what it's helping me achieve with the car. So before we go into the scatter plot itself, I think it's worth touching on, I guess, like a G-ball graph, or in other words, like a friction circle. You may or may not have heard this before, but all tires have like a theoretical maximum G they can pull. So like your average street tire might be somewhere around like zero point 0.8 to a very high 0.9 G. And then as you move on to like more of a race tire, onwards of 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and even higher. And the friction circle is, or I'm sorry, that maximum G can come in braking, cornering, or acceleration. Where it obtains the shape of a circle is where you start to blend braking to cornering, cornering to acceleration, so on and so forth. And what you want to do is ride that limit of adhesion, right? The maximum grip that the car has to offer, or that tire has to offer. And so the closer you are to using the tire's grip at any given moment, whether or not that's braking or braking and cornering or cornering and accelerating, the closer you are to that limit at any given moment, the more of the tire's maximum grip you're using and the faster you'll be, or the closer you'll be to your maximum potential. And so as a driver, we want to know how close we are to that limit, right? And we want to chase and be bumping up against that limit all the time. So instead of having to slap parts on the car or try to chase lap times by adding more parts, an XY scatter plot is going to tell us pretty quickly if we're driving at the limit of the car or if we're utilizing the limit of the car. So let's hop into a spreadsheet here and start looking at some XY scatter plots. Right here I have a scatter plot from Laguna Seca. Now, before we get into the scatter plot, I should note that to be able to create a scatter plot, or you have to have a data logger that is showing you accelerometer information in the X and Y axis. So X and Y is going to be cornering as well as braking and deceleration, or I'm sorry, deceleration and acceleration. If you don't have a data logger capable of showing you that information, you probably won't be able to create a scatter plot like this, right? So essentially, if your data logger gives you like a G-ball overlay or can produce a G-ball overlay, you can produce a scatter plot. Okay, so let me just break down this graph for you. So this is a scatter plot of data points that we have over here, which is our X and our Y accelerometer information. And 1.5, negative 1.5, negative 1.5, and 1.5. So it's square, or it's equal in all directions. And this x-axis here, we see positive values are acceleration, negative values are deceleration, and then I think positive values are turning left and negative values are turning right. In this case, it actually really doesn't matter, because we can see here that roughly going left and right, the car is capable of pulling about 1.2 Gs, right? And we can see here under acceleration, the Subaru or the WRX is pulling almost 0.5 Gs. And the decel close to 1. So right off the bat, one of the things that kind of irks me here is that I am not braking, pulling the same number of Gs as I am under a straight line absolute braking when compared to cornering. So something's wrong here, right? Either I need to get on the brakes harder, or I'm overheating the brakes to the point that I can't utilize all the potential grip of the tire. And I think it's the latter. I think the brakes are getting too hot because that's been a common challenge for me at Laguna Seca. And we'll show you in another plot why I think that is. But in this case, what I'm very, 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 very focused on is the transition between braking and peak cornering grip, right? And what I want to see is this riding of this curve or the limit, right? Because as I transition from full brake to full corner, there's going to be an arc that's going to form. That's kind of like this outside edge of the maximum grip of the tire or the limit. And I want to see the plot dots all kind of fall along this line, this imaginary line. And although it's not, we can see here that peak cornering grip is around 1.2, and if peak deceleration or peak braking was around 1.2, I should have this nice little curve that goes from here to here, right? And ignoring the fact that I'm not braking, I'm not using all of the tire under braking. If I just go to this 0.9 here and then follow the plotted dots all the way to the cornering G, I have this nice curve. So for all intents and purposes, I am using quite a bit of the tire. I don't know if I'm using all of it, but I'm using quite a bit of it in that braking to cornering transition, which is what I want to see, right? I should take a moment to step back here and say that these scatter plots, they're not going to tell you what the limit of the car or the tire is. It's going to give you an idea if you're using more of that limit, but the limit of the tire changes everywhere you go, right? Different road conditions, temperature conditions, different cars, different platforms, like all-wheel drive, front-wheel drive. It's completely different. And so that limit's always changing. Just this XY scatter plot, it's going to tell you if you're close to using all of it, right? Okay, so if we go ahead, so this D shape is ideally the shape that we want to see in an XY scatter plot. Okay, so let's go to the Thunderhill event. Same idea here, another scatter plot, same scales as you can see here, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, but the shape is completely different, right? Now we've got this kind of like V shape and not so much a D shape, and so it's telling me right away we aren't using all of the potential grip of the tire. Okay, so let's just look at the cornering. It's close, 1.2. This is a little bit higher than Laguna, I would say, but it's pretty close. It looks like 1.2, 1.3. Same here, 1.2, 1.3. Braking significantly higher than that Laguna. If you remember at Laguna, we were down over here. Thunderhill, we are now up to 1.2, 1.3. Now, I'm not going to look at the absolute number and say, hey, at Laguna, I was missing 0.1 G from the tire, just because conditions are different, temperatures are different, I don't know. But I want to look at the shape, right? And this V shape is very different from the D shape that I had at Seca, right? And what that's telling me is between my braking to cornering, I'm missing out on all this extra potential of the tire, right? If I think of this as a D, I'm missing out on all this potential of the tire, and I'm not using all of it, right? All this extra area, I'm not using it. So I need to better blend my brake and steering when I'm cornering the car. There's how much more and how to actually pull that off from a driving technique perspective. That's going to be different for every car or different track, but it's telling me that that is an area of improvement that I can work on. So without doing anything to the car, without making any setup changes, without adding more parts or whatever it may be, if I purely focus on what I'm doing from a driver and my inputs into the car, I should get faster. So there's time left on the table just by looking at the scatter plot. And that's what it's telling me, right? Because again, it should be relatively like a D shape. Now, how do I know it's supposed to be a curve? I'm not a math guy at all, but I know that, you know, the forces on the tires can be considered vectors, and so you have your acceleration, your braking vector, and then your cornering vector, and when you sum the two vectors up, you would get a point out here. And so if we know that our maximum cornering G is 1.2 degrees, I'm sorry, 1.2 G's, then if we were to do kind of that XY vector thing, we would, and we kind of plotted it along this graph, it would be a curve, right? And so it's going to be a curve. It's not going to be a line like you see here, or it's not going to be this like this kind of like inverted curve, right? So if this is a hyperbolic curve, this one is almost exponential, and so it's really telling me here that I'm not using all the tire, right? So sometimes you see people have like a line like this, and then you see this one's like an exponential curve. I'm really underusing the tire. Some guys might even have like a T, like a straight T, and this is indicative of a person that probably isn't trail braking. So they'll have all their dots along the x-axis, and then all their dots over here forming like a T, but none of this like no dots in this blended area between braking and cornering. So they probably aren't trail braking their car. They're doing all the braking in a straight line and then turning in and getting on the gas or whatever it may be, picking up the gas wherever they should be. But we want to see this kind of hyperbolic curve. So that tells me here that Thunderhill East, it has huge room for improvement. So the car did like a 203 something, and I don't know how much faster it can go. I just know that somewhere between braking and turning, I'm not using all of the tire, and that I should focus on that. So I hope that helps you guys understand how I'm using a scatter plot to determine if I'm using all the capability of the car. Again, it's not telling you absolute what that limit is, you know, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 Gs, whatever it may be. It's just telling you how close you are to using all of that limit is, right? And that limit is always changing. And the faster driver, all things considered, same car, same tire, same setup, the faster driver will always be the driver who gets that limit faster and then has the ability to ride that limit. So hopefully that helps you guys. And if you do have a data logger, I strongly encourage that you guys take a look at this scatter plot of information. It's very interesting, and hopefully you find all of this useful. I'm not the most knowledgeable person on XY scatter plots and driver development, but just as I'm learning things and finding ways to better understand where I can improve on my driving, I'm sharing it with you guys, and hopefully you guys are finding it useful as well. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, ask them in the section below. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you at the next video. Take care. Bye.